when we do actions that we don't want to just be angry and outraged, although we are that. We want to also convey hope and feel for a better future, how things could work.
That's Dan Shikuma, co-president of the Japanese American Citizens League Seattle chapter, and one of the founders of the Seattle chapter of Suru for Solidarity, a social justice organization protesting U.S. immigrant detention sites and supporting immigrant and refugee communities targeted by racism, state violence, injustice, and oppression. I'm Mimi Gan, and you're listening to Confronting Hate Together, a series of podcasts that is part of a multimedia exhibit created through a unique partnership of the Black Heritage Society of Washington State, the Washington State Jewish Historical Society, and the Wing Luke Museum of the Asian Pacific American Experience. In each episode, you'll hear from leaders of the Black, Jewish, and Asian communities about the challenges they face confronting hate and the work they do in their individual communities and together to combat the hate, bias, and discrimination we all see in the state of Washington and the world today. We'll hear more from Stan Shikuma later in today's program, along with other leaders of the local Asian American Pacific Islander community. In other episodes, we'll hear from leaders of the African American and Jewish communities as we explore how we are all confronting hate together. Michael Itti is the executive director of the Chinese Information and Service Center, a nonprofit organization working to support immigrants from all over Asia, Latin America, Africa, and Eastern Europe, creating opportunities for them to succeed while honoring their heritage. Before taking the lead at CISC in 2018, Michael spent 5 years as the executive director of the Washington State Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs and worked as a communications specialist in the Washington State House of Representatives. He was born and raised in Kirkland, the oldest son of 2 Thai immigrants who owned the Thai Palace restaurant in South Lake Union. On a recent afternoon from his office at CISC, he told us how the organization was founded in 1972.
University of Washington students who were volunteers, and they were walking around Seattle's Chinatown International District and saw many elders who were unable to access services that were available to the general public because the city and other jurisdictions didn't have the staff that understood their needs. So 52 years later, we are continuing their legacy by continuing to serve older adults, but we've expanded our programs to serve families and youth and additional immigrant communities who speak Russian, Ukrainian, Vietnamese, Spanish, and many more languages. So when someone calls us, we have staff that can speak, various languages and understand that lived experience of being an immigrant or being a person of color, or being from a diverse background. And so we want to make sure that they're able to be supported and they know that they're not alone, that they have an organization supporting them.
That support system became all the more important for the Asian American community in 2020, when the COVID epidemic struck and episodes of anti-Asian hate skyrocketed.
In 2020, we launched our anti-hate and anti-bias program, right there at the beginning of the pandemic when we heard the rhetoric from the former president. And so we knew that our communities would face a lot of challenges. So we formed a team that was able to document incidents of hate and bias. And then we were able to support their needs by connecting them to, legal assistance, behavioral health, essential needs. And this program is continuing today, and we're still seeing an elevated increase in hate and bias impacting not only the Asian American community, but many communities in our region and around the country. So the team is working in partnership actually with a national group called the Asian American Foundation. And through that support, we have established partnerships with several other community-based organizations, including Filipino Community of Seattle, Korean Community Service Center, and Utopia, Washington.
That sort of hate even made its way down to our youngest community members when kids returned to school in 2021. As Michael explains, CISC has long had an after-school program where kids can gather without fear of bullying, something that became all the more essential in the wake of the pandemic.
It's a safe place for a lot of our youth that attend area elementary schools. They can be themselves, right? Because many of them are recent immigrants and they are limited English proficient. So, in school, they're still, I would say, it's hard. From what I'm hearing is, they're still facing, some stereotypes and people making fun of them for certain things. And so it's important that, they see themselves in the education system. So one area is that we, encourage youth and families to support curriculum that reflects the diversity of our education system, right? I think the more that people learn about other cultures and other experiences, I mean, we all will to get to know each other better. And
getting to know each other better is one of the keys to reducing hate, because it's hard to hate someone you really know. For Michael, bringing people together, bringing different communities together, is the key to a better future together.
Every generation has a responsibility to make our neighborhoods, our communities, the state a better place. I think many people in the Asian American community that are connected to the Seattle area know the story of the Gang of Four. And also there are so many leaders, elected officials, other nonprofit directors who have helped to, move us forward. And we, I'm inspired by, all the folks that have done so much work to help to improve the quality of life that we can enjoy, and also fighting for policies and practices that have made the hiring process, expanding anti-discrimination laws to, seeing the marriage equality pass, I think about 10 plus years ago. So these are all hard-fought victories, and there's still more yet to come.
Need no soft lights to enchant me. If you only grant me the right to hold you ever so.
That's Aleksa Manila, by night Seattle's own Filipino-American drag icon, by day, a social worker for Seattle and King County, who also has her own private practice focused on queer and trans Asian and Pacific Islanders. Needless to say, in her own life and in her practice, Aleksa has seen the effects of hate in many different ways.
My general work is with public health with Seattle and King County, and the way that intersects with, with our main topic today, with confronting hate, is that I do find myself in a special place at public health, because I'm in an institution, in a government institution, in a system that initiates and confronts hate. We've recognized from the top down that racism, is a hate crime, and that's and that it's a public health crisis that we need to address. So not only do I deal with it as an individual, I have my work, luckily, an institution, a respected institution, that allows me to fight it and can confront it, not just by myself, but with a community. And I really, really appreciate that. I'm very grateful that I'm in a space that where I don't just have to independently think about my day-to-day work activities. I know that I'm in a space where I can think about being a person of color at work. it gives me safe space to honor that. It's not just lip service. I try to exist and lead with love, with positivity. And I think one of the ways that is true for me is leading with love. I think when we think about it that way, then it's not as much, it doesn't feel as much of a burden.
Mhm.
And right away you're confronting it with, in some ways, kind of in a problem solving kind of way. Instead of, like, for example, like, I'm starving versus I would like nourishment. I would like to nourish myself.
In her private practice, Aleksa hears stories about the hate and discrimination faced by the Asian American Pacific Islander queer community, experiences she herself has shared.
It's such a gift to be allowed, to be invited to enter into someone's personal story. And the way I look at it is, imagining that I'm being welcomed into their personal safe space of storytelling. And that's a gift. That's by invitation only. So I want to be respectful of that. But often, and I focus on LGBTQ API people and communities, because to me, there's something really special about that. And oftentimes, our identities as immigrants and migrants are often overlooked, and it's not seen as part of the intersectionalities of our identities. And oftentimes, what we together as the provider and the patient, or the client and the counselor, often identify is the historical traumas that we experience, that oftentimes as young people, whether that means as a child or as an adolescent, that we've kind of shoved it down as a trauma response and also as a coping mechanism. And so when you have a safe space without judgment, without ridicule, without prejudice, then you're just speaking not just your mind, but you're speaking from the heart. And when you create that space, that's when the healing can really happen.
But while Aleksa can see the positive movement in her private practice, when she looks at the world at large, she can't help but see the negatives.
I really want to stay positive, but it's sometimes it's hard and it really challenges you. It's, yes, we move forward, the whole, one step forward, two steps back, with the book bans happening, with, anti-abortion, policies, it's really impacting our progression and growth and evolution as a society here in the United States. It's heart-wrenching. And I know you specifically asked about trans existence, but I would be remiss not to mention, the other inequalities that are happening, particularly related to gender rights. I really do believe that when it comes to women's rights and LGBTQ rights and POC/Black equality and rights, I'm not saying it's all the same. I want to be very clear with that, but there's certainly a parallel. And the thing that I really have learned over time and I've really embraced is that, for example, access to abortion rights is really talking about gender equality. It's access to medical needs that are critical.
Think you could make arguments that things are getting better and also that things are getting worse. I think there's been much improvement in the knowledge that we have, studies that have come out, books written about all kinds of things, Black history, Jewish history, the Holocaust, Japanese American incarceration, uh, general immigration issues. So there's a lot more knowledge that's available, and in some places that is actually taught as early as elementary school. But there is also in the rise of right-wing groups, hate groups, particularly more in eastern Washington and Idaho, but it extends into other areas in western Washington as well. There's more knowledge and interest of civil rights and history of civil rights and human rights violations, but at the same time, there's people who still think that that was the golden age when you could openly discriminate against people and kick them out of the country if you didn't like them.
That, once again, is Stan Shikuma of JACL and Suru for Solidarity, talking about the changes he's seen in his 40-plus years living in Seattle. Stan has been a social justice warrior since his days as an undergraduate at Stanford, where he took classes in African American studies and Jewish studies, but where there were no classes in Asian American studies. So Stan and some classmates created the first Asian American Studies class at Stanford. He went to graduate school at Berkeley and the University of Washington, where he protested for fair housing rights and labor unions and against the draft and apartheid in South Africa. Nowadays, he spends much of his time with Suru for Solidarity, working with the group La Resistencia to protest the detention of would-be migrants at Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, which he says is no different than the incarceration camps where both his parents were forced to live during World War II.
The conditions inside the Northwest Detention Center have gotten worse recently. We knew that they were intolerable, but lately they've become deadly. Charles Leo Daniel died in solitary confinement on March 7th, which kind of triggered a lot of things. One is it triggered a mass hunger strike inside the detention center. And in the next 5 days, there were 5 or 6 attempted suicides inside. I think people were just so despondent and feeling hopeless.
For Stan, the political rhetoric used to justify facilities like the Northwest Detention Center is all an echo of how Asian American immigrants were spoken of in the 19th and first half of the 20th centuries. And he's happy to work together with anyone who wants to end the rhetoric and the policies it enables.
Yeah, well, it's largely driven by the politics of the time. And particularly the more right-wing politicians and Make America Great Again crowd are looking for scapegoats, and that's always dangerous. I mean, there's a long history from Chinese Exclusion Act to slavery to genocide against Native peoples to Japanese American incarceration and current issues with immigrants where, Trump is saying that immigrants are coming across the border are animals, they're not even human. That echoes a lot of the same tropes that we've heard about other groups, like before and during World War II, Japanese were compared to rats or snakes. So were the Chinese in the 1880s. And there's a lot of similar tropes about blacks and Jews and just about anybody that Muslims, anybody that people choose as an other, that they feel can be blamed for whatever ills there are. It's almost always an impersonal hate. It's like they're not hating Stan Shikuma or, Anna Tanaka specifically. It's kind of like we hate Asians. Actually, we don't even know if you're Japanese, Chinese, or Thai, but we hate Asians. Um, and it's when people can catch on to kind of this nameless, faceless horde, the invaders coming across the border, that they can, I think, can lead to that kind of hateful rhetoric, or painting a broad brush that they're all evil, they're all bad, they're all criminals, um, which justifies in their mind that so we should keep them out, so we should lock them up, so we should get rid of them. But I think it's really driven by, on the one hand, economic and social insecurity. People are uncomfortable with change, um, and they see their economic situation deteriorating or not as good as they hope it would be, or they feel like society is changing around them. It isn't like it used to be, and they felt comfortable in the old ways. They don't feel so comfortable in the new ways, and someone comes along and tells them, well, it's because of these people or those people or that community. We need to, everything could be back to the quote unquote normal, the old ways. If we just got rid of those people, or we restricted them to the other side of town, or things, so, and kept them out of our city. So I think that politicians and certain sectors of the media catering to that kind of thinking and amplifying it really spreads the seeds of hate.
One of the ways Stan and his community try to drown out the hate is by playing taiko drums.
And I've taken my taiko drums, and we've brought taiko players to a lot of the Tsudu for Solidarity actions. During COVID, I would take it in the back of my car, the biggest drum I had, and play it out of the back of my car, so that the people inside the Northwest Detention Center could hear and know that we were outside. I think better. And we also want it to be healing for the people who are participating, because to make it a two-way street, it's not like we are just doing things for these poor people who are inside. It's like they are also doing things for us. They're giving us inspiration. They're giving us their stories. We are healing ourselves by helping others.
For Stan, it's also important that the Japanese American community, which endured so much during World War II, has gone on to thrive in Washington state and is using its hard-won achievements to inspire the less fortunate today.
Yeah, with Tsudu for Solidarity, one of the big things that we decided is that we wanted to be the friends that we didn't have in 1942. Because in 1942, there were some individuals who were, trying to help us out, but there wasn't anybody who was petitioning the government, holding a demonstration outside the State House, at the fence, demanding that the place be closed down and that everyone be released. And so we feel an obligation that when we went through redress, we got reparations, we got an apology, we got a small payment for our troubles and our hurt. And at the time we said, never again. Never again will anyone, will we allow the government to do this to anyone else. And so now our slogan is, never again is now, which we kind of borrowed from Jewish community as well. Because we got redress and we got an apology, we have some moral authority to say something about government misdeeds. And with moral authority comes moral responsibility. So if we don't use that authority to speak up when others are suffering, then why have it? what does it really mean?
That was Stan Shikuma, Aleksa Manila, and Michael Itti. Different generations, different ancestries, but a shared vision of fostering community built around common goals, human connections, places of belonging, and hope for a better future. I'm Mimi Gan, and you've been listening to Confronting Hate Together, a joint production of the Black Heritage Society of Washington State, the Washington State Jewish Historical Society, and the Wing Luke Museum of the Asian Pacific American Experience. Special thanks to our lead project sponsor, the Seattle Department of Neighborhoods, and our major sponsors, the For Culture Heritage Project and the National Park Foundation. Thanks as well to the Washington State Historical Society for their Diversity and Local History Internship Grant, and our interns, Shania Black and Daniel Sauter. This program was written and produced by Jeff Schwager and edited and engineered by Kamna Shastri. Executive producers are Cassie Chin, Stephanie Johnson, Tolliver, and Lisa Kranzler.